Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hi, I'm Wika Hafsarul Lubis from 6H. In this video, I will do my talks from my lecturer. It's about what do I understand about rhetoric. First, I will tell you why rhetoric is required. Have you ever bargained with a car salesperson to lower a price? Wanted to negotiate a rise with your boss? Needed to give a presentation in front of a group? Had an argument with a friend over a controversial topic? Or made a complaint over the phone? Have you ever written an essay? Composed a letter applying for a job? Read a book? Watch an advertisement? Or contributed to a blog? What do you need to do these things well? Rhetoric. Rhetoric is not just empty words or fine political speeches. Rhetoric is the study and art of writing and speaking well, being persuasive, and knowing how to compose successful writing and presentations. Rhetoric teaches us the essential skills of advanced learning and higher education. In rhetoric classes, students learn to think logically, to discover strong or weak arguments, to build a good case on a controversial topic, and to overcome the all-too-common fear of speaking in public so that they can deliver crisp and well-prepared speeches. Rhetoric is a fundamental building block of a good education, whether it is followed by studies of engineering, English, or entomology. Clear thinking, good argument, and logical discussion are essential to academic student success in any discipline and field. The better the essays you write, the better your grade. The stronger the presentations you make, the greater your academic success. The more you understand how to criticize and analyze what you read and study in music, mathematics, or the modern language, the stronger your education. So why do we expect you to study rhetoric at the university? Because we want you to learn to think at an advanced level suitable for university education. In the rhetoric classroom, you will learn how to conduct rigorous and responsible knowledge production, from becoming more acute and attentive interpreters of the world around us to writing more deeply critical, meaningful, and persuasive presentations and papers. We want you to learn how to contribute more usefully to discussions and to social debates, knowing what arguments are sound and what fallacies to avoid yourself or discover in others' work and words. We want you to write the best essays you can write in the future, knowing the profound principles of composition and creative writing. We also know that you will need to speak in front of others throughout your life, and you will do it more effectively if you have studied some great speeches, understand what makes them great, and have the opportunity to practice those principles yourself. There are 3 rhetorical devices for persuading an audience. Anyone who's done public speaking will have likely heard the term rhetoric, or the ability to speak or write persuasively, usually used in debates or arguments. Professional rhetoricians are well versed in all of the available methods to persuade. Most of us aren't professionals, but knowledge of rhetorical strategies can still help with presenting a topic, whether in a classroom or a business meeting. There are three basic points to consider before arguments, and those are to know your audience, know your topic, and the words you may prefer to use. Let's see the point 1. Know your audience. Before doing anything, you need to know who you are speaking to. Different audiences will require different vocabulary and different methods of speaking. A group of scholars is likely going to be looking for different words than a group of businessmen. As an example, let's say the person you're speaking to is a friend. Here, you'd be free to use more familiar language than if you were speaking to strangers. Next will be to think about what this particular friend is like. If he's a pretty sensitive guy, appealing to his emotions might work better. If he's skeptical, using logic and credibility is more likely to bring him to your side. Figuring out what makes your audience tick is relatively simple when focusing on just one person, especially if that person is someone you know well. You'll have to think a little more broadly and make a few more generalities when talking to larger groups. One way to do this is to create an audience persona. Simply speaking, this is a sketch of the speculated core members of your audience used to help understand how people think. For example, to create a profile of your typical audience member, you can ask yourself any of the following questions. First, what is their socioeconomic level, nationality, and age? Second, what is their status or role within their organization? Third, what problem do they have that you can address? Fourth, what is on their mind at the moment? Fifth, what is their likely attention span? And last but not least, what level of interest do they have in the subject? Point 2. Know your topic. Unsurprisingly, different topics will naturally lend themselves to different types of arguments. If you're giving a presentation on statistics, you're likely to focus more on logical aspects than you would if you were giving a presentation on abstract art. This doesn't mean to ignore other types of argument, just to know what your subject may be more inclined towards. What's more important is to be as informed as possible on your chosen topic. While this may seem like common sense, it's important to know your subject enough depth so that you can be prepared for counter-arguments. This usually involves learning about views that may oppose yours. Say, for example, you're discussing the rather hot-button topic of abortion. You want to look at the arguments for the other side, why people either are for and against the subject, as well as arguments for your own belief before creating your argument, or else you risk being stemmed by powerful arguments from opposition. Try to consider what your audience may ask. These functions much like creating an audience persona, as it allows you to prepare for answers ahead of time. Create a few questions that seem most likely to be asked, or get a friend to help by having them ask questions, and write down some potential answers to practice. Point 3. Word choice. Word choice is stressed by professors and writers alike as incredibly important, and with due reason. Different words carry with them different weight and so may affect audiences in different ways. While this relates very strongly to the previous 2 points, it is also important to consider the topic alone. In rhetoric, there are considered to be 2 main types of language: connotative language and denotative language. Connotative language is generally more symbolic and encompasses the emotional meanings behind words. An example would be to call someone who expresses extreme empathy a bleeding heart. The press carries somewhat derogatory connotations, as it implies that the individual is easily moved to any cause that stirs their sympathy. Denotative language focuses more on logic and appeals to an audience's knowledge rather than their emotions. Examples of denotative language include such statements as "the facts that" and "as you know." Denotative language usually revolves more around the textbook definition of a word rather than what an audience might associate with it. There are many words that have different connotative and denotative meanings. The word shrewd by a dictionary definition means clever, but carries with it a negative connotation. Likewise, the word guy originally meant happy, but modern audiences would latch onto the connotative meaning of homosexuality. Connotative language likely differs between audiences, so this acts as another aspect of knowing your audience. For example, one audience may associate liberal with something negative, while another may associate the word with something positive. Keeping certain triggers words or the connotative words that will produce an extreme reaction in mind will help you understand what words to avoid or use for different audiences. Even words like pronouns can have a profound effect. For example, using I less often expresses confidence, as the speaker seems to feel less need to refer to him or herself to prove a point. Conversely, using I more often makes an individual seem more open, since the speaker is perceived as expressing deeply held personal opinions. For further reading on this subject, check out James Webb Pennebaker's The Secret Life of Pronouns. Once you have these 3 elements in mind, it's time to decide how to make your argument. There are 3 different rhetorical appeals or methods of argument that you can take to persuade an audience: logos, ethos, and pathos. Method 1. Logos. Logos is most simply known as an argument from logic. In essence, you're taking a subject and giving the reasons why a certain position is positive or negative from the point of view of the facts. Arguments from logic are necessarily restricted to the subjects you'd expect, such as math or science, but can appear just as easily in such subjects as morality or public relations. Environmental concerns use this method quite frequently when they compare energy-efficient methods like solar power with fossil fuels. Method 2. Ethos. Ethos is, like the name suggests, an argument from ethics. Generally speaking, making an argument from ethos requires showing you have goodwill for your audience, though it can also mean that you are using your own credibility to show why you have authority to speak on a topic. Arguments from ethos pop up all the time with political campaigns. For example, in one of the Republican political debates in 2015, Senator Rubio states, "I'm not new to the political process. I was making a contribution as the Speaker of the third largest and most diverse state in the country well before I even got into the Senate." Here, Rubio is using his previous experience to help support his bid for the presidential candidacy. Arguing from ethos is likely something you are already familiar with through job applications. When writing cover letters, people often include their qualifications, trying to convince potential employers that they should receive a job through prior experience and their enthusiasm for the job. You've probably also been subject to this sort of argument, especially in the variety of movie commercials that state critics are calling it the best movie of the year. Let's take the same scenario mentioned under logos and argue it using ethos. You would probably start by reminding your friend of the times you've been right about similar topics, such as movie suggestions your friend later enjoyed. Maybe you'd add something like the rhetorical question, would I lie to you about this? Perhaps you've read a lot of books. Remember that ethos is also your authority to speak on a subject. Having read widely shows your knowledge of the book market in general, even if not all of the books have been enjoyable. Perhaps you are an actual authority on this subject, an author, an English professor, or something of the like. In an argument from ethos, this is the time to invoke that authority. Another strategy would be to draw on the ethos of others to help support your claim. This is something often seen in research, such as a paper citing experts on a subject to help prove a point. To put this into the context of the proposed scenario, you could show your friend reviews from professional critics. Method 3. Pathos. Pathos, the last form of argument, is argument from emotions. Here, rhetoricians appeal to the audience's emotions and try to elicit a response from them to win them over. In the modern day, pathos tends to get the short end of the stick Basing arguments on emotions is usually believed to make the argument flimsy and less credible. However, emotions are powerful motivators and are incredibly useful in convincing others to see a subject from your point of view. President Obama's speeches supply some examples of patterns. Take this example from his speech on Syria in 2013. The images from this massacre are sickening. Men, women, children lying in rows, killed by poison gas. The words have a heavy emotional impact. Sickening primes the listener to expect something horrible and repulsive, and then mentioning the people killed, especially children who are usually seen as innocent, creates the automatic emotional reaction that this is wrong. This is, of course, a rather brutal example, and not all appeals to patterns have to be so reliant on extracting negative reactions in the audience. A friend liar example would be appealing to an audience's sense of community. You've likely seen pathos arguments used quite a bit in movies. The you burn with us scene from Mockingjay Part 1 is an example of a scene based almost entirely on pathos. Let's take the scenario examined under the previous two methods and examine it through pathos. A way to start might be to explain the emotions the stories evoke in you. Example: you might call the works action-packed or moving, two popular pathos buzzwords. If you are truly enthusiastic about the series, this is the point where you would most likely want to allow that enthusiasm to overflow. The best method for argument, generally speaking, isn't just one of these, but a combination of all three. It's up to the individual to decide what combination to use. These are just the basics. There are many more rhetorical topics, and even the ones mentioned can be explored and in greater depth. However, mastering the basics will start you on the way to giving more persuasive presentations, and from there you can learn what methods work best for you. And then I will tell you about rhetorical situations. To use rhetoric, you must first analyze the rhetorical situation you are in. An effective speech is one that responds to its rhetorical situations or context. Second, identify what needs to be communicated. Third, provide a strategic response using rhetorical tools. When you analyze the rhetorical situation, think about the following. The rhetor or yourself, the person speaking to the audience, your personal characteristics and beliefs will influence what you decide to say, such as age, gender, geographical location, education, previous experiences, socioeconomic status, etc. The audience, the people you are trying to persuade, usually the same factors that affect the rhetor affect the audience. Think about what they already know. What questions or reservations might they have? What expectation do they have? Where should we conform to and stray from these expectations? The setting, the situation which causes the need for your speech. For example, current events, location, time period, political situation, etc. Where is this speech happening and when? How does this impact you? For example, speeches may need to differ between countries. The topic needs to be relevant to the rhetorical situation you are in. How does your topic limit what you can do for the audience? Depending on your audience, what should you include or exclude? The purpose, why are you saying this? Is it to entertain, educate, persuade, instigate action, etc.? Let's move to rhetorical modes. Rhetorical modes are patterns of organization used to produce a specific effect in the audience. They assist in increasing the speaker's ethos, pathos, and logos. Narration. First, telling a story or narrating an event. Second, use facts. What happened, where it happened, when it happened, and who was there. Third, it helps pull information into a logical order, usually chronological order. Fourth, purpose. To evoke certain emotions in the audience. Description. First, recreate, inventing or visually presenting a person, place, object, event or action through words. Second, this helps the audience imagine what is being described. Third, use precise verbs and nouns and vivid adjectives. Fourth, using the five senses is especially useful. And then the purpose is to evoke certain emotions in the audience. Argumentation or persuasion. First, articulating your opinion about an issue, proving or contesting a point of view or an issue. Second, consists of presenting the evidence. Third, argumentation generally use inductive arguments, deductive arguments, or a combination of the two. Inductive arguments, forming generalizations from the evidence. For example, all the theme parks I have been to have been safe. This is a theme park, so it must be safe. Deductive arguments, forming conclusions from generalizations. For example, I don't like busy place. That shopping center is really busy, so I won't like that shopping center. Fourth, persuasion is a type of argumentation with a call to action directed at the audience. And the purpose is the speaker tries to get the audience to agree with their opinion, and in the case of persuasion, the speaker tries to get the audience to take action. Exposition. Informing, instructing, or presenting ideas objectively. Exposition can use the following techniques. Illustration or example. First, using evidence to explain a general idea or statement. Second, the stronger your evidence, the more likely the audience will consider your points. Third, usually used to support an argument. Fourth, use evidence suitable for your topic and audience. Fifth, figure out how much evidence you need to use to support your argument depending on how complex the topic is, the audience's knowledge. And then the purpose is gives your statements or arguments more credibility and helps the audience understand more quickly. Definition. Explaining what a word, idea, etc. means to your audience and or to explain what it is not. This is more difficult than looking up the term in a dictionary because you may be redefining a common term or explaining a term that is commonly used incorrectly, such as the word depression. By reshaping what the audience took a concept means, they can see and think about that concept in a different way. There are multiple ways you can define something. It doesn't have to be in a clinical way. You can use the rhetorical strategies discussed later. And the purpose is helps the audience see things from your point of view. Process analysis. Explaining how a particular event occurs or how something is done or how something works. For example, how to sew or how to move on from the death of a loved want. This procedure is usually explained in clear steps. Purpose: to provide clear information so the audience can fully understand. The more the audience understands, the more likely they will be persuaded. Diffusion: dividing one concept into smaller ones. This can be helpful for you, the speaker, as it can provide the audience with an insight of how you view a concept. The purpose is to help the audience understand a complex issue. Classification: often looking at a diverse group of objects and finding similarities, the rhetor creates categories based on the similarities and gives each category a name. The purpose is useful for organizing complex issues. Cause and effect: examining the causes of a situation and the consequences of it. Cause help you understand why something happened, and effect helps you understand what could happen or what has happened. Especially useful when the rhetor can show a cause and effect relationship the audience haven't noticed before, because this helps the audience see the situation in a different way. Often leads to debates, as it's not always easy to determine this relationship. The purpose is to determine how concepts are related to each other. Comparison and contrast: comparison looks at similarities and contrast looks at differences. The more different the two things initially appear, the more interesting it will be to look at the similarities. The purpose is generally to show something as more superior to another, to show unexpected similarities, or to help the audience understand a person, place, idea, etc. in relation to another.